Before you start writing Chapter 5, I'm going to introduce you to the idea of the ambiguous character. So, consider this character. Good, bad, or can't tell. The vampire was dressed in a long flowing dark cape fastened at the neck by a scarlet silk cloth, and his face was whiter than new fallen snow. His cruelly thin grey lips drew back, revealing a pair of amber-coloured fangs. His eyes had no whites, they were blazing red like some savage animal. So we're told about a dark cape. Now, dark can suggest evil. Whiter than new fallen snow. So perhaps we've got a sense of something that's lifeless. But then we have cruelly thin grey lips. And that word cruelly tells us that we have got to be dealing with an evil character here. Amber-coloured fangs. Now, amber means orange, so perhaps that suggests danger, something you need to watch out for. Eyes had no whites, so that sounds quite inhuman somehow, doesn't it? Blazing red. And finally, that he's like some savage animal. So there's no way that this character is going to suddenly turn out to be a nice person. What about this one? The ghost came out of the bottom drawer of a chest of drawers. It oozed out a grey cloudy shape about 3 feet long, smelling faintly of wood smoke, sat in a chair and began to hum to itself. It looked like a bundle of bedclothes, except that it was not solid. You could see quite clearly the cushion on the chair beneath it. It took out a ball of wool and some needles and began to knit. Now, in this case, we're clearly looking at quite a friendly, pleasant character. It oozed out, it's not very threatening. Got a grey cloudy shape. Smelling of wood smoke, so perhaps you're now thinking about marshmallows or sizzling sausages. Sat in a chair. It began to hum to itself. Now, humming is not usually something that you need to worry too much about. And it's also described as a bundle of bedclothes, not something you'd be too worried about. Began to knit. Sounds a bit like somebody's granny here, doesn't it? So in these two situations, we've got characters that are clearly good or bad, but you don't always want that when you've got an ambiguous character. Let's look at this one. Glam was a huge unkempt man with a shock of white hair and great grey staring eyes, uncanny to look on. He was enormously tall and horribly large of head. The hair was wild and the eyes were great and glassy. The rafters creaked under him and the whole building groaned with a strain when he walked. Now we're hearing quite a lot about how unpleasant he looked, unkempt, shock of white hair, horribly large of head. Hair was wild, so he's quite wild looking. But that doesn't necessarily mean he's bad. His eyes were great and glassy. The rafters creaked under him, and the whole building groaned with the strain. So we can work out that if he did turn nasty, he could do a lot of damage. But really none of the words here tell us that he is going to be an evil character. We just don't know which way it will go. And what about Strider from Lord of the Rings? This is how he's described when he first appears in the book, but those of you who've read the book or seen the film will know that he is a good character. Suddenly Frodo noticed that a strange-looking, weather-beaten man sitting in the shadows near the wall was also listening intently to the hobbit talk. He had a tall tankard in front of him and was smoking a long-stemmed pipe, curiously carved. His legs were stretched out before him, showing high boots of supple leather that fitted him well, but had seen much wear and were now caked with mud. A travel-stained cloak of heavy dark green cloth was drawn close about him, and in spite of the heat of the room, he wore a hood that overshadowed his face. But the gleam of his eyes could be seen, as he watched the hobbits. So he's strange looking, he's weather-beaten, he's listening intently, we don't quite know why. His clothes have seen much wear and they're caked with mud, so he's not maybe the best looking person. Doesn't make him a bad person. Cloak of heavy dark green cloth, a hood that overshadowed his face, and the gleam of his eyes as he watched the hobbits. So this character, as I say, turns out to be good, but at the time you first see him, you can't be sure.